Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technologies, and ideas shaping a profitable and sustainable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today I will be doing a solo episode of a wrap-up year-end of AgCulture Podcast for 2025. Now, one of the outcomes that I was hoping for when I first started the AgCulture Podcast was for this to be a platform that shows patterns in agriculture, things that are happening in real time in agriculture, not just highlighting personalities and stories, which I think is very important, but showing the trends and things that are changing in agriculture in real time. So I'm going to bring up what I thought repeated itself in conversations throughout the year in the podcast interviews that I did, as well as where tensions keep showing up in agriculture and what of my own thinking had changed over the course of the year with the conversations that we had on the podcast and some of the other things that I've been up to as well. So I'm going to start out with what things changed in 2025 in agriculture, and I'm specifically going to be focusing mostly on the U.S., but in a global nature as well. And I think one of the big ones in the U.S. sector has been around the change in labor challenges in agriculture sectors, specifically dairy and high-value crops, where there's a lot of physical labor that's needed on a regular basis, where usually foreign workforce has been the main driver of that labor pool. Now, I think over the last year, we've seen some mixed signals as to what is going to be a potential workable solution forward for these specific sectors in agriculture, as well as the specific groups of people that fill those roles. And that's been a real challenge and a big conversation across agriculture on both sides of the argument. I think one thing that most people can agree on is that the U.S. borders have now been secure, and that was the issue number one of the Trump administration, was to have secure borders. And now that we have that, a lot of people, especially the agricultural community and other communities and sectors that utilize a lot of foreign labor, is now what? Where do we go from here? What is a workable solution that we have in front of us to put into legislation to make this economy work for the long term in these sectors? That's something that it will be really interesting to see if in the U.S. we can accomplish that here in 2026, as it's going to be a midterm election year. Typically, those are pretty hard to get done, and there's a lot of opinions on both sides of the aisles as to what a workable solution is. The second big change, again, seeing this from a U.S.-centric perspective, is really a 180-degree change around in the government's priorities in agriculture. During the last administration, prior to 2025, there's a really big focus on climate agendas, and that being the predominant driver of a lot of the policy and incentives in agriculture. And when the Trump administration got in office, that really flipped very quickly, and they made it very clear that those incentives were going to be realigned and really focused on economic impact and national security from a food security standpoint. Now, that caused some confusion in the market, and obviously that upset some business models for certain companies that were working in agriculture because of those drastic shifts and very rapid shifts that occurred. But it seems to have brought things back in line with more of a fundamental market needs-based policy agenda. And the third big change, going back to the Trump administration's agendas, high on that list of topics was foreign trade. And part of that was really putting out all of the trade deals that the U.S. has out on the table and saying which ones work for the U.S., which ones don't, and what needs to be reevaluated. And with that, obviously, you're going to have a lot of political games being played, a lot of negotiations back and forth. And one of those big leverage points that we see in trade negotiations and trade policies all around the globe is the leverage against commodities, specifically agricultural commodities, from one country to another. And that creates a lot of large swings in pricing and demand and supply, and also uncertainty, which boils down to uncertainty in commodity prices. And we definitely saw that this year in the U.S. and around the globe. So addressing those three things, I did have a very recent episode on global trade and how that works. And I think that was very insightful for that last point that I was making. But we also brought up the point several times throughout the year in different episodes about labor and the impact of incentives being realigned in agriculture, how that's affected different agricultural businesses and farms in the U.S. and abroad. So go back and listen to some of those episodes if you're curious to hear more about that, if you missed those things. And we're going to move on now to the big insights that I found in 2025 in the episodes that we put out. Now, one of the things I talked about a lot this year, whether I was on a stage or on my LinkedIn posts or in the paper that I put out for Nuffield, was data in agriculture. We have a lot of data in agriculture, especially in the dairy industry. Particular, that was my focus. In every sector, we're still grasping for key insights that generate from the data that we collect. There's many platforms, there's many new businesses out there, new startups that are trying to generate more valuable key insights from this data. And there's roadblocks along with that I talked about in my Nuffield paper, which included policy as well as data integration to bring together true insights that are more holistic rather than siloed to a specific aspect of a farming operation. The next big insight I heard a lot from the different tech companies that I talked with, as well as the farmers that were implementing technology on their farms, and other points outside of technology implementation, is that the trust is becoming a scarce resource on farms today. And that's for good reason. There's been a lot of big promises made by tech companies saying what they're going to do on farm and then not delivering on those promises, with real dollars being spent from slim margin businesses like farms. And that puts farmers in a really difficult position to be able to trust the next person that comes along promising great things or a great return on investment for a new technology that they're looking at implementing. So the key point with that is I don't think farmers are necessarily resistant to change, especially ones of today that we see that are growing, that are successful, but they are resisting being burned again, and they've been burned in the past. So there are mechanisms that need to be in place for them to really make wiser decisions on who they can trust, what technologies they can trust, and what type of impact that's going to have on their operation financially or from a business efficiency standpoint. So I believe trust will show up when incentives for the farmers align with the tech companies or organizations that are pushing different things, as well as government policy. And I think also when the language is very plain and the insights or specific things that are being touted as results are very easy to identify and clear for the farmers. And for tech companies and as well as other organizations, one thing that happened during the COVID time period is people forgot to go out to the farms. They forgot to visit the people that they're actually, and the businesses that they're actually trying to service and provide solutions for. So I think there's a lot more trust built a lot quicker when the companies that are trying to build something, trying to innovate, actually go out to the farms, actually talk to the farmers, pinpoint the real needs and issues that farmers deal with on a daily basis, and understand the systems and understand the operations of the farmers. Truly seek to understand first before they try to provide a solution. And on top of that, also going to the farmer with humility, not saying, hey, I know everything. We've got this great thing that's going to be better than sliced bread. Really sitting down and saying, okay, I need to learn. I'm here to learn. I'm here to seek your problems so I can hopefully develop a solution in the future. I think that mindset and mentality for whatever organizations working with farmers is very important to have, because farmers respect somebody that is knowledgeable, but also humble as well. Now, another piece that I wanted to bring up about trust is, as I've been going around, I've been hearing and seeing a lot of great advisors and great people in the industry that were really stalwarts in their roles and looked at very highly as being a source of knowledge and truth for different sectors in agriculture, whether that be a predominant banker or farm advisor, or industry expert. A lot of these people that have this really deep well of wisdom and have big networks that they're connected with that can spread information and ideas more robustly are retiring, just like the farmers in the agricultural sector are retiring. You're seeing a lot of these really highly capable people that support the farms also retiring. And we're losing out on some of that industry knowledge and power of the network is also being lost. And it's not being replaced very quickly either. It's being lost at a greater rate than it's being replaced. So I think that's another trend that we're going to have to look at and keep an eye on in the future and how that will affect farms and farm businesses. Now, another key insight from 2025, obviously I did a lot of travel still this year. This was the last year of my Nuffield Scholarship. So I went to communities all around Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all over the U.S., and every community that I was in, I was reminded about the role rural communities play as being part of the overall food system in agriculture. Now, one point, even outside of the food system, that I thought was really interesting, the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Rollins, at an event I was at about a month ago, brought up the statistic that rural America represents about 17% of the U.S. population, yet 42% of those that serve in the military come from rural communities. So it really shows the value system and the lifeblood of the society of countries, cultures that come from rural areas. Even though it's not a majority of the population, it still has a very big impact on the values of a society. And I saw that not just in the U.S., that was all over the world. So other key points around rural communities is that farmers don't farm in isolation. Everything they do affects their local community, whether that be the labor pool for that community, providing leadership in that community, and also the economic well-being of that community. How are they impacting the other local businesses? So when those farming operations are at risk, it puts that local community at risk as well. So I think that's something that we've seen time and time again is farming operations have consolidated, less farms have been in a community. You see a lot of that local business starting to dry up. Now, the one aspect that I kept seeing in strong rural communities that really hit me was, and I talked about this several times in the past year, was that the vibrant rural communities were communities that also had infrastructure, whether that be energy or processing capacity, for adding value to the commodities that were produced by the local farms in the community. These were by far the most vibrant communities, and a lot of times it was around dairy. Dairy is very local. And it costs a lot of money to haul milk, which is a very bulky commodity, to get processed into a more dense commodity. So a lot of that's done locally. And those were communities that were usually thriving. As well as with forestry communities that had local mills in their area. Those were also communities that I saw that had a pretty vibrant local economy. So one question that kind of came out of that for me that I really want to think about more and encourage you to think about is, can we build world-class agricultural businesses in hollowed-out rural communities? Some might say yes, some might say no. So I think that's a good question to ask ourselves. And then if they can't, what are we going to do about it? How do we keep rural communities vibrant? Another insight that I took away from this year, and this is just mostly dealing in a lot of the industry behind-the-scenes stuff that I get to see and be a part of, is that the best leaders are getting more honest with what's going on in their businesses and what they're seeing in the sector that they're in. Now, how does that honesty show up, right? That's what everyone's asking. So to me, that means that they're engaging with all stakeholders in a way that's a lot more transparent than maybe what we've seen in the past. They also admit when they don't know something as well and try to get input from other stakeholders. They're more open to running experiments and trying to innovate in smaller projects more quickly to figure out where to move to in terms of market. And they're also working together to try to solve more system-wide challenges, not just what's right in front of them. They make bets more consciously. If you want to know what I mean by that, I had talked about it in a couple of different episodes, but I encourage you to check out the book, Thinking in Bets. That was a very interesting concept. I think several key leaders that I've seen over the last year have taken to heart, and encourage you to read that to really understand that concept more. But that's definitely something that I noticed in several leaders that I admire. And with that, I just want to give one personal example of somebody that I have a personal connection with that I think exuberates all of those characteristics very well, especially over the last year here. And that's Dennis Rodenbaugh. He's the current CEO of Dairy Farmers of America, which is the cooperative that I'm a part of. And he's done a really good job of showcasing humility with confidence, and also taking on some big challenges across the whole sector, and putting himself out there in ways that could have been potentially detrimental to his career, but really seeing the need that somebody needs to take the lead on this and move forward and really say something about a certain issue. And he's done a great job with that. He doesn't get a lot of accolades in the press, and I just wanted to give him a shout out here on the podcast. Have a lot of respect for Dennis and the team that he's built around him. All right. So before we wrap up here, I want to give a couple of examples of things that changed my thinking in 2025. One of those that really hit me hard this year, and going back to one of the first things that I talked about at the beginning of the podcast, is noticing how changing policy along with strong leadership can change the market and change what drives value in that market in a very quick time frame. Now, I was one to always think that changing policy and making big system-wide changes like that were very slow, cumbersome, and would not be implemented fast. And I was proven wrong this year. That had very dramatic effects on the whole economy, I think globally, and shook some people up, but really set the course for what's going to happen now in 2026, and something that a lot of people didn't think was going to happen as rapidly as it did. Now, I think there were some key policy changes around AI that were implemented that I didn't think would happen. Specifically to the U.S. will be a lasting impact on what I would call the AI race between the U.S. and China, and who's going to progress quicker in that realm. And we're still dealing with some of those policy issues, looking at, is it going to be state policy driven, or is it going to be at a federal level policy driven AI? And right now, my horse is on the federally driven AI policy side. I think that's where it's probably going to be played out. That will be shown probably through a few different court case findings that come out in 2026. But that was another big area that policy made a big impact, not just in agriculture, but in a new technology that will eventually touch every aspect of life. Now, in 2025, I wrapped up my Nuffield Scholarship and presented it and got a lot of feedback on my paper, which I appreciate. This strengthened the thought for the need for leadership in the ag data space and how foundational that is going to be for ushering in AI, artificial intelligence, to agriculture in the future. I spent quite a bit of time on certain podcast episodes talking about this. I will be spending a lot of time in 2026 talking about it even more so. Now, one last key thing of my thinking that changed for 2025, and this is really a warning that I'm going to issue to farmers and business owners that maybe overconfident in their systems and what they think they know. We are living in a world that is changing quickly. And those that are too prideful will miss what will keep them competitive in the future. So I encourage you to think through this. I believe that only those humble enough to stay curious and continually strive to be better will thrive in the future. And again, those are some of the themes that I talked about in industry leadership as well, is having that humble attitude because things are changing so rapidly today. All right, so what will be the focus for 2026? Again, I'll be spending a lot of time probably talking about artificial intelligence and really looking at its progression in agriculture. I'm spending a lot of time right now on several projects, really trying to figure out how the industry can progress together. And I'll be talking about some of that on the podcast coming up. But I think you're going to see AI move from a lot of these pilot projects that we're seeing today to more standard operations in 2026. I think we're going to see more consolidation and collaboration in agricultural sectors going into 2026. I don't think that's going to be slowing down anytime soon. And I think we're also going to see farmers demanding more vocally interoperability of their systems to be able to aggregate the data that they're providing and creating on their farms. Now, to close out this episode for the end of the year here, I just want to reiterate the mission of this podcast, AgCulture. Now, I originally started it to be a catalyst for curiosity by sharing compelling real-life stories of entrepreneurs, what I would call entrepreneurs at different companies, and innovators in agriculture from around the world to discuss challenging topics of our time. And I think we've done that over the last 2 years now, and I want to continue to do that. And we're going to do that through engaging conversations, as always, and stimulating narratives. We're going to aim to provide a platform that not only informs, but ignites a sense of purpose and possibility. So again, I just wanted to reiterate that mission. That's very important to me. And very important that we keep doing that. I think it's very needed. And if you know of any guests that would be great, that would fit that mission, please reach out to me or have them reach out to me. Usually LinkedIn's the best way to do that. Really appreciate that. We're always looking for new stories, great guests to have on our podcast. And just want to say thank you so much for another year of listening. We've done over 100 episodes now of this podcast. I did not imagine getting more than 50 when I first started, to be honest with you. So very grateful for the audience that we've grown. And I hope this continues to add value to you, the listener, in the new year in 2026. I'm going to be taking a couple weeks off, so we won't be releasing any episodes for the next 2 weeks. We'll have several back in January that I'm excited to put out that we've already recorded. But I just want to take some time now at the end of the year here to spend some time with family and really think through what we want to do with this podcast in 2026. So again, thank you for listening. If you found this episode useful, please share it with somebody you know. As always, that's how we grow our audience here at the AgCulture Podcast. Thank you very much for listening and have a happy new year.